All right, last chapter, chapter 20, reproduction. So when we look at reproduction, what we're talking about is it is taking the genes from two different gamete cells, a sperm cell, an egg cell, and looking at the process and how not only are they brought together, but what happens at the cellular level. The importance of reproduction, of course, is for genetic variation. When we have the random genes from two separate individuals. So our germ cells, of course, our sperm and our egg. These are from our primary sex glands, the gonads, the testes, and the ovaries. And just as a review, mitosis is how a cell splits to replace itself. Meiosis or meiosis is the process where the gamete cells have their chromosomes split in half. And if you remember back to how this occurs, it is a jumbling of the chromosomes, so no two are the same. And fertilization, of course, is where the two are fused together. And then in development, we have terms for the developmental phases. We have zygote, embryo, and fetus. If you remember, we will have 23 chromosomes from both the male and the female, which provide the 46 chromosomes for the individual. So when we talk about our chromosomes, there's 23 from the male, 23 from the female. So we have 23 pairs, and 22 of those are what we call autosomal, and that is the unique characteristics that relate to how tall you are and the color of your hair and whether you have big feet or little feet. And so those are your autosomal chromosomes. The last pair, the 23rd, is the sex chromosome. And when we look at the first 22, there's going to be 22. There's going to be two, what we call of the alleles of each gene. And the allele is just the changes and when we look at alleles, there's the two options for each chromosome. And so where this is talking about silence, this is where you can have a dominant trait. And so one is dominant, the other one is silenced. And so when we look at the sex chromosomes, this one is specific in that females will have two of what we call X chromosomes, and the mom is always going to pass on an X chromosome, whereas males have an X and a Y. So the male is the unique characteristic there, of course, is the Y. And so from a gamete cell, a sperm cell, the male can pass on either an X or a Y chromosome. And so the sex of the child is determined by the sperm. So an apology is being made to all of those women throughout history who were blamed for not having sons or daughters, whichever was wanted. And when we look at the differences, X and Y chromosomes are different in every single way. The X gene has almost 1,100, I should say the X chromosome has almost 1,100 gene pattern specific input control guides for the female. The male has 80, and that's it. And one of the specific ones in that 80 for the Y chromosome is the testes-specific genes, and that is the one that determines male or female. And the X-linked genes are responsible for quite a few genetic mutations and diseases compared to the Y. This is the difference in what the X chromosome looks like from the female, and this is the Y chromosome from the male. So they are different in almost every way except for they both have genes. In females, because there are two X chromosomes, one of them is inactive. And you can actually see this in certain cells where there is an inactive portion. And so one of the things that you look for in a certain cell is this bar body, and this is just the inactive portion. And in certain leukocytes, there is an inactive portion that is able to be found. And the patterns that we see for development when we look at the formation of testes and ovaries. So after fertilization, immediately after fertilization, we should say, the structures are identical in males and females. Now, the reason why they say they're identical is because we all start from a very small ball of cells. And so those balls of cells don't immediately differentiate into having ovaries and testes. And so it requires for additional development, differentiation of the different types of tissue, and it is during this embryonic growth that there will be a differentiation between the testes or the ovaries, which is guided by what we call testes determining factor, TDF, and of course this comes from the Y chromosome. And so they look at it specifically, which is the SRY gene, which is the short arm of the Y chromosome, the SRY gene. So there's two important terms there. So you have the testes determining factor and the SRY gene, which is where this specific testes determining factor is developed from. And so this is just showing, okay, so we have XY and we have XX. They both start off as a zygote, again, a little ball of cells, so it's not like the first thing that develops is the ovary and the testes. But because the Y does bring the SRY gene for the testes determining factor, as soon as that differentiation starts, it will lead to the development of testes. So this is going to be just kind of the normal pathway for XX. There's no SRY, there's no testes determining factor. So without the Y chromosome, all of the development would occur as female. And so as the testes develop, then that leads to the development of the seminiferous tubules, the interstitial cells, and then that leads to the development and the production of testosterone.